1 minute and 23 seconds past 1 in the morning, the roof of Reactor 4 did not simply lift away, it ceased to exist. In our history, the explosion cracked the lid and spat a fraction of the core into the sky. In this timeline, the steam surge finds no resistance, the graphite ignites all at once, and 190 tons of burning uranium fuel vaporize in a single concussive breath, a nuclear detonation without the bomb, 100 times the fallout of the disaster the world remembers. Within 12 hours, the cloud reaches Berlin. Within a week, 400,000 square kilometers of Europe will be uninhabitable. To understand why this version ends nations, you have to understand what the RBMK reactor was. It had no containment building, no steel dome, no thick concrete shell, only a thin industrial roof over an open core. A design flaw that Soviet physicists had privately called a matter of when, not if. If you find these what-if histories worth chasing, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which alternate timeline I should explore next. So when the core goes, it does not fight its way out. It is simply gone, lofted into the night as a column of incandescent particles, and the wind that April was blowing west. Consider what that wind carried. Cesium-137, with its 30-year half-life, the poison that decides which soil can grow food and which cannot. In the real accident, roughly 5 to 10% of the core escaped. Here, all of it does. Every fission product, every gram of plutonium, seeded across the continent in a matter of days. Pripyat, the model Soviet city built for the plant's workers, receives a dose no evacuation order can outrun. The firefighters who climbed the ladders that night, the operators who ran toward the reactor hall, the families who stepped onto their balconies to watch the strange colored glow. The first casualties number in the tens of thousands before Moscow has even admitted anything is wrong. And Moscow's instinct at first is silence. That silence is the second catastrophe, because the fallout does not respect ideology or borders. In Sweden, technicians at the Forsmark nuclear plant find radioactive dust on their own workers' shoes and assume for terrifying hours that their reactor is leaking. Only when they trace the isotopes do they realize the contamination is blowing in from the east. The Soviet cover-up collapses not through confession but through physics. A Swedish Geiger counter tells the world what the Kremlin will not. By the third day, the exodus begins, and it is unlike anything Europe has seen in peacetime. Warsaw empties toward the west. Trains out of Kiev, a city of 2.5 million, run standing room only, then stop running at all when the crews refuse to return. Poland distributes iodine to children from folding tables in town squares, the tablets bitter on the tongue, the lines stretching past churches whose bells no one thinks to ring. In Bavaria, farmers are ordered to plow their spring vegetables back into the earth. In the Netherlands, milk is poured into the sea by the tanker load. Across a continent, the ordinary act of eating becomes an act of calculation. A grandmother in Gomel, in southern Belarus, packs one suitcase and stands at her door, unsure whether the danger is behind her in the house or ahead of her on the road. She chooses the road. Millions make the same choice within the same week. They do not come back. Now the map redraws itself in a way no cartographer intended. A permanent dead zone opens across northern Ukraine and southern Belarus, the very heart of the Soviet breadbasket, the black earth that fed the Union. That soil is now cesium-laced for generations, and the timing could not be crueler. The USSR had already suffered failed harvests in 1984 and 1985, was already burning precious hard currency to import grain and oil just to keep its cities fed. Take away Ukraine's fields in a single spring, and the arithmetic of the entire Soviet economy stops working. This is the moment the Cold War quietly ends, not at a summit table, but in an empty wheat field. Mikhail Gorbachev had staked everything on perestroika, on the promise that the system could reform itself, that openness would build trust. But you cannot reform your way out of a poisoned harvest. The Soviet Union is forced to do the unthinkable, to go to the West, hat in hand, and beg for the grain to feed its own people. Every ruble of prestige built over 40 years drains away in those negotiations. The republics are watching. If Moscow cannot protect them, cannot feed them, cannot even tell them the truth about the sky, then what exactly is Moscow for? The answer comes faster than anyone in the Politburo dares predict. Ukraine, its northern lands lost and its people scattered, begins openly speaking of independence by 1987. Belarus, which absorbed the greatest share of the fallout, follows. The Baltic states, long restless, sense the tremor and press harder. In our timeline, the Soviet Union dissolves at the close of 1991. In this one, the machinery of collapse is running by 1988, 3 years early, and far more bitterly, because it is born not of hope, but of a wound that will not close. And the reactors of the world go dark with it. The anti-nuclear movement had already been growing teeth since 3 Mile Island in 1979. A full-scale Chernobyl does not merely feed that movement, it ends the argument entirely. In West Germany, hundreds of thousands march, and construction on every planned plant halts within the year. France, which had bet its entire energy future on the atom, freezes its program in 1987 and begins the slow, expensive work of turning away. Across the globe, reactors under construction are abandoned mid-pour, their cooling towers left as gray monuments to a future that was canceled. But energy does not vanish when fear arrives, it only changes its source. Into the gap steps coal and natural gas. For 3 decades, the fuel that would have come from the atom comes instead from the ground and the smokestack. The nuclear pause becomes a nuclear abandonment, and the carbon that a Fleener grid might have avoided pours skyward year after year, invisible where the cesium was not. The world that feared one kind of poison breathes in another, slowly, without noticing, until the warming it accelerates becomes the defining crisis of the century that follows. That is the strange arithmetic of this timeline. To flee the reactor, humanity ran straight into the furnace. The exclusion zone at the center of it all never greens over into the accidental wildlife sanctuary that tourists photograph in our world. It stays a scar, a region the size of a small country, fenced and forgotten, where the wind still carries what the reactor gave it. Cartographers draw it in gray. Textbooks call it the day the map of Europe changed shape without a single army crossing a border. And so the century turns on a difference of degree, not whether Reactor 4 failed, but how completely. In our world, the lid blew off, and it was enough to help topple an empire slowly and warn a species carefully. In this one, the whole core rose into the sky at 1:23 in the morning, and by the time the sun came up, the future had already been decided for everyone downwind.